Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. I apologize. My voice is a little hoarse. I've been in a meeting since 7:30 this morning. Not the same meeting, but a meeting. So I think we have just a few things to run through. We'll see how long it takes, and then of course we'll do Q&A and answer as many of our questions as either knowledge or time allows for. We have approved, I needed that number this afternoon, 145. I was close, I said 140. Conditional use permits. And I thought we had 299 applications. It's only 79? Oh. All right. So fewer than I thought. Although that doesn't count the dispensaries, right? No. All right. So 308 cannabis applications and permits. The core equity program RFP was released back in September. That period closed October 19th. We received a couple of proposals, and now we're going to be going through the process of reviewing and awarding that what would be a contract. If you're totally unfamiliar with it, I would kind of describe our core equity program as a small business support center, and so the RFP is really for the administration of this small business support center, where persons could go and get help either entering into the cannabis industry or transitioning their existing business into the legal cannabis industry. Hoping to award that contract in December, and hopefully that vendor will be able to stand up that operation quickly. If you weren't aware, the City Council has adopted a cap of 50 cannabis non-storefront deliveries in the Southeast Industrial Area, otherwise known as the Power and Alliance area, and located in Council District 6. We have only 50 applications? No. So we have 50 applications. Kind of an ironic number. At one point we had 53. I don't believe that all of those applications are complete, right?
There's still some.
Right. So applications will be processed in the following order: the date in which they were received and their completeness. Right. So if you submitted a complete application and you're part of one of those 50, you're good. If you have an outstanding or incomplete application and someone comes in behind you and submits a complete application, you are now number 51. So if you have an application in and it's incomplete, or you're not sure if it's incomplete, I would contact our office and make sure that application is complete. And if it's not, to remedy that if you wish to be one of those 50 permits. The provision does have a sunset of October of next year. However, whether or not that sunset or that provision will be extended or not is unknown. So if you want to be one of those 50 licenses, get a complete application in and get it in like yesterday. I went over that. Registered delivery applicants. If you are one of our registered delivery non-storefront dispensaries, please submit your building permits. You think you don't need a building permit, you're probably wrong. Because there's something that needed to happen on the inside of that building or to the outside of that building for you to be compliant with what you want to do inside. If you think you don't need a building permit, you are probably wrong. So if you're unsure, contact our office. Otherwise, it's going to start becoming more and more problematic the further this goes down. This goes for every business. Get your building permits in. If you are an operating registered business, whether you're a registered cultivator, we've already told you this. If you're a delivery, if you do distribution, get your building permits in. Can't stress that enough. And please, on behalf of our building department, have a licensed professional do the plans and engineering. It's not going to save you money having your buddy who's got a CAD system draw up your plans. It's not, I promise you. Get a licensed professional to do the drawings. If you're doing cultivation and you're going to have sprinklers or manufacturing, hire a fire protection engineer to get involved. I know it costs money, but I can't tell you the number of plans that are incomplete and or that have one correction after the other, and it's ultimately going to save you time getting through this process if you have plans that are done by professionals. We've now tiered our distribution permits, including and created self-transportation. Those new fees are on our website, but essentially we did an attempt to align better with the state as to how their permits work. Provisional licenses. The BCC is issuing provisional licenses. I think this was an attempt at finding some sort of middle ground between the complexity of issuing an annual permit and the ephemeral nature of a temporary permit. So these provisional licenses come with a catch, and the catch is that you need to have your temporary. They're only going to be issuing temporary licenses through the end of the year. So if you don't have a temporary, you're not going to be eligible for a permit for a provisional license. If you don't have your provisional license, you're going to have to get your annual license. There could be a very big gap between now and whenever you get your annual license, and during that time, you're not going to be allowed to operate, and you're going to have to go through all of the approvals that are going to be necessary to obtain one's annual license. So if you think that there is going to be value in obtaining a provisional permit, make sure that you have your temporary license from the BCC. Oh, the state regs. How I loathe thee. I'll be honest, I have not had time to become an expert since October 19th on all the changes. I know that there's some significant parts around ownership or that potentially affect things like white labeling and control and the role of consultants and other vendors as in relations to the operation and function of a cannabis business. I think some of them were potentially unintended, and that the BCC may be issuing a clarifying memo around things that will potentially currently potentially affect things like white labeling. Packaging, are going to be, I think this one is going to stick. So the phase in of the child-resistant packaging, allowing for the use of exit bags through 2019. After that, beginning 2020, everything's going to have to be child-resistant and tamper-evident, including flour, which is maybe unnecessary, but... Delivery, they made some changes to delivery. Our cap in the city of Sacramento has not changed. It's still $3,000, but the state did lower it from 10 to 5. with a bit of a variable in there between whether it's dynamic or a static delivery. Security personnel must be on site during the hours of operation. If you want to make changes to your security plan, you need to first take a look at what was approved and what is approved on your conditional use permit. Changes to your security plan may require minor modification of your conditional use permit. So while state requirements may set the floor, if there are conditions on your operating permit or on your conditional use permit that are above and beyond those state requirements and you want to change them, you cannot do them unilaterally. That is going to be a discussion and potentially a decision that we are involved in. So you have an approved security plan. We ask that you do not deviate from that approved security plan. And deviations from those may require, again, altering the conditions of approval on your operating permit or on your conditional use permit. Delivery with technology, not even going to go there. Thank you for that. Testing. I mean, we can, if anybody wants to kind of get into these, we can. There's a whole bunch of people in the. We can all talk about this. Cannabis special events. So the governor signed a bill that will authorize local governments to explore issuing licenses outside of county fairgrounds or agricultural spaces. We currently have not adopted an ordinance that would allow us to do that. My plan is to first seek approval to have these events at Cal Expo. We've had one at Cal Expo. It was the first one in the state, yay! But it was a one-time approval. So in the next couple of months, next month, I think, November 27th. We're going to be going to council with a resolution that would allow the city manager or his designee to approve special events at Cal Expo beyond just the one that we had. Subsequent to that, probably sometime in early 2019, we will begin to have the policy discussion with the council of, okay, you've allowed them at Cal Expo, now do you want to allow them at other places? I have no idea how that conversation is going to go. We'll see. I get probably still like a phone call a week of like, hey, can I get a permit to do fill in the blank? So there's definitely demand for it, but we'll see kind of where the council might land on that. Micro businesses, so that is finally, I'd say, heading to council with and stop at the Law and Ledge Committee with an ordinance to approve micro businesses. The catch, if there is one, is that we don't have a micro business conditional use permit. We kind of looked into it. It was really complicated, like writing it wise, and created all sorts of problems in the interest of time. Kind of parking lot of that issue and are moving forward with the operating permit, which means if you want to do something, if you want to add retail to your production, whether it be a storefront or non-storefront delivery, you would have to get 2 conditional use permits for that same property. You could apply for them simultaneously, but it was really the only way for me to get this done literally this year. Yep. We will also be having a discussion around adding new storefront dispensaries. This is an item that has been requested by a council member. On November 13th, we'll have what may be the first of several discussions on this topic. depending on the direction that comes out of it. There's no vote to be had at the council meeting that night. It is purely for discussion only. I've done a survey of, staff has done a survey of kind of other cities, and there isn't any kind of golden magic number of dispensaries to population. Everybody seems to be kind of a little bit all over the map. Sacramento kind of falls somewhere in the middle. San Jose is much larger than us. They have 16 dispensaries. Portland is about the same size as us. They have 160-something dispensaries. And we have 30. So if the council does have direction on that, the process would be that we would go back and formulate a policy around that direction, and then take that policy to the city's Law and Legislation Committee. And if it was approved out of that committee, then it would go before the full council for a vote. If their direction is to add some number of dispensaries, the currently approved methodology for that would be a lottery. Cal Expo events on November 27th. Special events outside of Cal Expo, like I said, sometime in, I don't know if it's going to be in January of 2019, but hopefully early in 2019. As well as beginning the conversation for on-site consumption. If anyone has any good examples of on-site consumption other than San Francisco, I'm definitely interested in that. I've checked out some in San Francisco, and I don't know, they seem to operate okay. They're kind of nice places. Kind of look like a steakhouse if you haven't been there. It was so Barbary Coast. If you haven't been, it's kind of like cross like Morton Steakhouse and like Shady Lady, right? It was like okay, this place is kind of cool. Yeah, the persons whose job it was to operate the dab machine, I thought that was kind of like, huh. So it's like, so what do you do? I work a dab machine all day long. I will say that there's some questions around like how that's all going to really legally happen. I have questions around the intersection between on-site consumption that's indoors and the Clean Indoor Air Act. I have huge OSHA questions, right, which is like the workplace safety stuff. Like, I don't know how you can have an employee that's just, whose job it is to work inside a consumption space, right? Like how is that legal, right? So we shall see. Yes, ma'am. Puff, puff, give. Yeah, so I think there's still some details to be worked out on how that's all going to work. I mean, yeah, you say like the cigar bar and that's the model, but I had the guy from the public health department from San Francisco County it's a contiguous city county, was there, and I'm like, how's this legal? And he's like, I don't know. Right? So, yeah, it wasn't too reassuring. He didn't cite a specific code section. So that's kind of all I got. If you have specific questions about the change in regs, I will be honest. Like I've been away for a couple of days, and the regs dropped on a Friday, and like I think the experts are probably sitting in this room as to the new changes, but I'm happy to make something up. So yeah.
We have someone who's potentially equity eligible
Yeah, the fee reimbursement, I'll just say, is as a whole problematic. Or code sections that this says that these fees are, non-reimbursable. However, I'm always willing to have a conversation about any and all parts of our code and how they're applied, and so, yeah, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Yeah.
It mentioned retail requires.
I'm not sure if it was the regs that you were quoting, but it mentioned retail having to have security. Is that just storefront retail or also non-storefront having security personnel during operating hours?
That's for storefront.
Yeah, retail.
Yeah, that's for storefront retail.
I have a question over here. Do you foresee any upticks or effects on the cannabis industry with the passing of the commercial hemp act, to where, because that's where a lot of CBDs come from?
In the Farm Bill, you're talking about passage of the Farm Bill. Has the Farm Bill passed?
Yeah.
The Farm Bill just passed? So is hemp federally legal now?
No, hemp, just hemp, not cannabis. Yeah, but yeah, hemp is where primary amounts of CBD come from, so there will be a lot of people trying to make actual products combining both cannabis and hemp. Just wondering if you foresee any new types of business models and things coming up out of that.
I don't know about that, but it's probably going to make everything much more complicated. I think a lot of heads move in different directions. So, yeah, what I thought was in the Farm Bill was kind of like more or less the legalization of hemp, and maybe that's not true. And
Okay, next question over here.
Yeah, I've been, smoking weed for a while, but I was doing it for medical. Okay, so I had my hip was messed up for some reason, and they said I had this and that and the other, but it was excruciating pain. Then I found out I didn't have a hip; it had eroded. So I had an operation, and I was eating the edibles, for the pain. It was working, everything's fine. But after they put the alcohol and cigarettes in, the alcohol, and they went under that program, they redid that, I started eating the same edible, and I was getting dizzy. Like it was alcohol. I stopped drinking when I was 22. I stopped drinking when I was 22 years old, so I'm saying I wanted to check to see if they was putting alcohol in the edibles, since it's...
No,
It's illegal?
Yeah.
Okay, if I buy some more and I get dizzy, can I get it analyzed?
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It should be tested before you
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would make
Okay.
sure you're purchasing through a licensed dispensary.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Joe. Question about the storefront dispensary discussion in November. If I remember correctly, close to half of the current dispensaries weren't current on their taxes and had not good bookkeeping. Is there a possibility or a discussion that they would potentially lose their license or be replaced by other dispensaries?
All 30 of our dispensaries are current on their taxes, and all of them have recently completed an audit. So we have a couple that are not currently operating because they're in the process of applying to relocate, but otherwise I think we have 28 operating dispensaries and 2 in the process of relocating, all current on their taxes.
Next question over here.
I have a question. I don't know if there's a place for it. I'm new startup trying to find a location, and I didn't know, is there somewhere to go to find places, or is there people that have trying to do manufacturing, non-extraction? Is there companies that are in existence that are renting space? What does anybody have recommendations, or I can talk offline about it if possible?
I'm not the person to ask about like renting business space, but there are certain zoning requirements for cannabis companies, and distance requirements from schools and things of that nature.
So that's why I was looking if maybe like there's a business already in existence that's renting space in their location. Is that possible? Or
It's
like
possible
co-use?
there's one sitting in this room.
Well, I didn't hear the joke at my expense. What was that?
No, there's possible there's one sitting in this room. So,
Oh, okay.
I mean,
So that's what I was asking.
imagine if you stand out in the lobby, someone might come up to you. There you go. I'm sure if you wait in the lobby, you might get more than one card.
All right. Good afternoon. In regard to the core program, you mentioned the award of the contract will be 12/18, and then you said operation will be started quickly. What is quickly? I got to imagine that the winning vendor will have to have the system implemented soon. That's just that's me assuming, which could go wrong sometimes. So do you have a better estimated date, some time frame?
No, and I apologize for that, but it's gonna, it's gonna be really kind of that level of detail is gonna be dependent upon kind of the vendor and probably really their existing infrastructure.
One more quick question. One more. Will cultivators and manufacturers be required to do business with the core program members? Or be incentivized?
They're not required. They're certainly encouraged. I'm looking at a incentive program that would do just that. Not really for like I'm working on an incentive program.
Okay, next person over here.
Will the council rehear or reconsider the issue of letting dispensaries vend outside of their current permit location?
For special events?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that was kind of an unintended rule. We're gonna fix that when we take the Cal Expo item. The original intent behind that was like, look, we're giving you a permit to sell cannabis here. We don't want to find you 4 blocks away trying to do the same thing. And it was the law of unintended consequences when you draft policy. But we're gonna fix it.
Hey, Joe. So returning to the micro business licenses, so essentially my understanding with that right now is you've got to have a CUP with the proper zoning or designations within the property for the different uses, correct? And then essentially you have to submit 3 separate business operating permit applications for those different usages. And then is that going to be combined into a single micro business license down the line, or are they going to kind of, do you know what that's going to look like? Or
So if you've already applied for 3 or more different business operating permits, is that kind of the premise of the question?
that's the plan, essentially.
So if someone has applied now and you've submitted 3 different operating permits and you want to become a micro business, I think the time to do that would be like at your renewal. Otherwise, if you haven't applied, you can just go ahead and apply for the micro business once it's adopted.
So it will be a unified application process once it's ironed out?
Yeah,
Okay.
be a single permit that you're still going to have all that same information. It's just going to be one into one application.
Right. And at least as far as applying for the state microbusiness license, right now, until that has been ironed out, is the local authorization just basically having the CUP and the individual BOPs?
Correct.
Okay.
So if you've applied for 3 or more of those operating permits in a single location, you can go ahead and apply for the state's micro business.
Okay, and all the three of the BOPs are prerequisites for the local authorization,
Yeah.
not just the CUP.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Joe, regarding the building permits, on the slide it stated December 12th is a deadline to submit. It said delivery underneath, but is that for all businesses, like a multiplex that has multiple cannabis businesses within it? That's all the December 12th deadline?
For registered delivery companies, right? So we did just for our cultivators an attempt to kind of bring the existing operating delivery companies into the legal framework, okay, the registry, say, look, we know you're out there doing it. You know, so if you're one of those and you are operating, we need you to apply for your building permit.
Okay. So it was specific to delivery? For that,
Yeah.
just for that
well,
slide, that's clarity.
we've already given cultivators a deadline, right? And that deadline was October
Passed.
5th, October 1st, right? That ship has sailed, and you know, thankfully, I think everybody actually has applied. And whether your permit application for your building permit is complete is a different story, and that hammer's coming. But get your building permit. Again, if you think you don't need a building permit, you're probably wrong. Really do mean that. Hire a professional, hire a design professional, hire a fire protection engineer.
The whole gamut. Cool. All right, thanks a lot.
Joe, regarding self-distribution, is that just for producers, or could a non-storefront delivery business get self-distribution as well?
The self-distribution is self-transportation. So we initially had self-distribution, and then the state kind of made some changes in an attempt to align with the state. We got rid of our self-distribution, which was kind of intended for a manufacturer, cultivator, you know, who also want to do their own distribution. We've since just created a distribution permit. It's based on gross receipts, and created a transportation license. The state's self-distribution permit is not a distribution permit. It does not come with the administrative privileges of taxation and testing. It comes with the administrative privileges of just moving stuff from point A to point B, but you are not a licensed distributor. It's really a transportation permit.
Great, thank you.
My next. Joe, me?
Joe, over here.
Over here. I have a question similar to this gentleman over here about micro-business. I'm still a little confused. If you apply for a, say, CUP for manufacturing and, in the case I know of, a retail dispensary in the same site, but you want to add distribution, do we need a separate distribution CUP, or can we apply for a distribution BOP?
So our conditional use permits are broken into two kind of basic categories, right? Production and retail. Production being cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution. Retail is either storefront or non-storefront delivery. If you have a CUP to do cultivation, you want to add distribution, you can apply to do what's called a minor modification of your conditional use permit. Submit a new floor plan to the planning department, and they can say, okay, yes, this part is now distribution and not just all cultivation.
Okay, I can understand that one, but on a site where there is not an existing business yet, but we've applied for a CUP for manufacturing and for retail, but we also want to add distribution. Do we need a separate CUP, or we just need 3 BOPs?
You need to amend your manufacturing CUP, which is a production CUP,
Right, okay.
to add distribution.
And we just add distribution to that. We don't need a separate distribution CUP.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes, hi. I'm a student and I'm writing a paper for our professor. And said, is there any sales tax on the goods and services and whatever? Where is the revenue going to be applied to?
Wait, was the last part of the question?
And if there's a sales tax on the goods and services, where is the revenue going to be applied to?
Oh, taxation. That's a whole other topic. So yes, there is a sales tax. You kind of add up all of the taxes in cannabis, and it probably gets close to, depending on the nature of the excise tax, which is calculated in two different ways. So you have a cultivation tax, which is $148 a pound. You have an excise tax that's 15%, either of an assumed 60% markup value if it's an arm's length transaction, or 15% of the direct sales price if it's a non-arm's length transaction, and then you have sales tax on top of that, and then a 4% gross receipts tax for cannabis. And all that tax money goes into either the state general fund or into the city's general fund.
Okay, thank you.
And it's way more complicated than that, actually. Then you have 280E.
Next question over here, Joe.
Hi, would you mind repeating your recommendation for businesses regarding the provisional permit, if you have a temporary permit?
So the state is only going to be issuing provisional permits, provisional licenses to people that have a temporary. So in order to qualify for the provisional, which is going to be that kind of intermediary step between obtaining an annual, you need to have your temporary. And the state is only going to be issuing temporary through the rest of the year. So folks that don't have their temporary in hand by the end of the year are not going to be eligible to receive a provisional license, which is going to be easier to obtain than the full annual permit. So if you don't have your temporary, you can't get your provisional, which means then you're going to have to go through the whole process of obtaining your annual permit, and that's going to be, I'll say, a more lengthy process, and during which time that business would not be allowed to operate. Get your temporary.
Anybody else have any questions?
Sweet.
First, real quick, is this presentation going to be online anywhere?
Do we put them online? Yep. Along with the video. No, we don't. Oh, man.
Smile, you're on camera.
Things I don't want to know, right?
And I wanted to see to what extent, more generally, you or others have noticed sort of supply chain bottlenecks evolving in the emerging markets here, and where the state is stepping up enforcement as far as distributors or dispensaries doing businesses with those who may not all the way be in the white market yet.
So in terms of like supply chain, I think this room is probably like full of people that are more equipped to answer that question than I. I've heard of backlogs at testing facilities. I've heard some mixed signals or conflicting information from distribution companies, and distribution companies. Everyone who's in the legal market, and I don't use the term white and black markets, but legal and illicit. But those operating within the legal framework should only be dealing with those folks that have a temporary, a provisional, or an annual state license to do so. Otherwise, it's an illegal transaction. But I'm sure if you, I'm looking at a whole bunch of people that can answer like those supply chain questions probably a lot more specifically than I can. But I think testing's still problematic.
Thanks.
This might be a little premature, but for the conversation you're going to be having regarding on-site consumption, could dispensaries or wherever that's taking place be held liable similar to bars, where if you overserve someone or something were to happen after they leave, that you could get in trouble for it?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is I don't know, but one can only assume that the regulations and liability that are placed on alcohol establishments are going to be equal to, or cannabis businesses are going to be equal to or greater than those applied to bars. So, my crystal ball would say, looks probable.
Anybody else have any questions?
Really? 50 minutes? This is like, right? Cool. All right, going once, going twice.
Off. There's a little bit on here. How are you? How's re-entry? Yes. Give me a second. Let me put these away.